And we're back, everyone, to the Organizing and Common Ground essay using the annotations chart and creating an outline for this upcoming essay, Common Ground Essay in English 101. This is part two. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, well, how can I connect all of these pieces together? We've already looked at the annotations chart, learned how to use an annotations chart, but there's an essay to write still. So how do we make it all kind of come together and find ourselves from one side of the maze to the other? Well, I'm going to show you what a basic introduction, body, and conclusion will look like for this essay. Okay, this is a very basic formula. You'll find it in your book as well. I'll just go through it quick. And here's our topics chart. So this is the same topics chart we had in part one. And I'll just show it to you here real quick so you can kind of refresh your memory. But basically, the topics chart tells us where we can find the arguments that the authors are trying to make and that we're going to use in the essay. So for example, we have our two authors, Jones and Stewart. The issue is inner city poverty. Jones argues that inner city poverty is caused by a lack of responsibility, while Stewart argues that it's caused by a lack of government action. The arguments for Jones are mostly anecdotal, some statistics. Stewart uses research from longitudinal studies. There is a counter-argument. Jones will concede to historical arguments, while Stewart refutes statistics from the Cato Institute, which is where Jones is actually writing from. I'll point that out later on. But common ground. So this is the important part here. What are the two things, or what are the one or two things that these authors might actually put down their disagreements and say, you know what, there's a possibility that we can work on this problem together if we, focus on this as the reason for fixing the problem, for trying to fix this problem. And for both of them, it would be, they both show concern for the poor. They both seem like they're both concerned for the poor. And you'll notice over in Stewart's column, he also states there was also conversation about the U.S. economy in his essay. Now, I should point out that these essays are completely fictional, completely made up. Off the top of my head, I did these. So let's, for the sake of argument, say that it came up that as I'm going through these fictional essays, this is something that I recognize as a possible place where these two authors can come together. And then, of course, we have our motivating factors. For this particular example, we're using values, ideology and ideals, fears and concerns, priorities and agendas, binary thinking, statistic, and public good. You'll notice under the essay 1 and essay 2 columns, I have the type of argument that is being used, whether it's example, anecdote, research, observation, statistics, what have you. And I also have where I can find these. Paragraph 3, 7, 8, paragraph 11, page 2, whatever it is, it's there. And I can quickly access and quickly access the article because I have it written down in my topics chart. So let's get this started. Okay, here's what an outline looks like. We have an introduction, of course. Now, you want to be you want to make sure that you are using this space to introduce the debate to the readers, okay? We also want to make sure that we clarify for the reader why this debate is so important. Okay, so let's take a look at our example. Income inequality is a highly debated and contested issue and is arguably a cause of poverty in the U.S. Since the 2008 stock market crash, more Americans have found themselves living in poverty than at any time since after the Great Depression of the 1930s, and according to the United States Congressional Budget Office, poverty costs U.S. taxpayers $30 billion a year. Colbert, 12. Now, let me point something out for you. While you're only using two articles, okay, you're only focusing on two articles as the point of debate, okay, as the authors will be debating this. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be using outside sources. You still have a requirement of outside sources, and in this example, now this is again fictional, completely fictional. It's made up, but you'll see that I have used this fictional Colbert character as a reference for this statistic from the Congressional Budget Office. Now, in your essay, you should be using real articles and essays and journals. Okay, don't make anything up. This is strictly for the sake of example. Okay, so basically what the introduction should include is, historical information, background, social relevance, people, agencies, laws affected by the issue being debated. Now, this is just one part of the introduction. There's more to this introduction. You should be introducing the for and against authors of the essays that you've analyzed. All right, so let's take a look at our example. Again, these are fictitious. I made these up off the top of my head. So, but you're going to be doing the real thing. Okay, so our example is Professor Stewart from the University of California at Berkeley states in his article, Why the Right Hate the Poor, that poverty is caused by Republican lawmakers' ignorance of what it's like to live in poverty. Ms. Jane Jones from the Cato Institute, in her article, Pulling Up on Your Bootstraps is All Anyone Needs to Do, argues that government creates poverty by regulating and taxing private industry. Okay, so we want the writer to have information here. That's what we're doing. We're providing them information to show them that you have used authoritative voices. You've done your research. You've looked up genuine articles from genuine sites, their academic sources, and this is what you're using to demonstrate the debate that's going on. Okay. Also, in your argument, we need a thesis. As always, we need a thesis. Your thesis should follow all of the above information, okay, and it should follow the above information and should sum up your analysis of the two sides of the debate and giving at least one possible point on which the debaters might find common ground. One of the mistakes that people make in writing this essay is they wait till the very last page to give common ground. That's not going to work. Here's our example. While both sides of the debate disagree on the cause of poverty, it is clear that both authors agree that there is a need to address the problem of poverty in one of the richest countries in the world for the sake of creating prosperity in the U.S. So here we have one possible point of debate that's being presented, and also you'll notice this is I'm not coming out and saying one point of possible common ground. Do that, but it's also nice if you try to figure out a way to imply instead of just outright state that, hey, this is my common ground sentence here. Okay, but we'll want to see that in the thesis. The common ground statement is something that we're going to want to allude to in the thesis, and you can do it throughout the essay. One of the mistakes people do is wait until the very last sentence and go, and a possible common ground is, whatever. That's not very good writing, so try to avoid that. Also, you want to, just to make sure that you do this, make sure that you include a transitional sentence at the end of your introduction, leading us to analysis. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. There are three possible strategies for giving an analysis, and the analysis, these are options for designing the entirety of the body of your essay. Okay, this isn't a paragraph by paragraph blueprint for writing the essay. You should use one of these strategies, okay? You should use one of these strategies, maybe one or two, but definitely don't want to just do option one, then option two, then option three in your essay. That's not what this is. This is just to help you kind of figure out how to present the information in the body of your essay. So option number one is find one issue or idea that both sides seems to care about in the campaign or in their articles for this example, and then describe or analyze how each side presents that issue or idea. So example, both sides of the poverty debate focus on the role of government in improving the lives of the poor. However, Stewart focuses on government taking an active role in helping people get out of poverty, and Jones suggests that government should get out of people's lives so they can make better choices for themselves. So note that both sides are focused on poverty, but they do so in different ways. So if I was going to use this option, this is the approach that I would take. This is probably one that uses the common ground thoroughly. There's possibility for a lot of discussion about that common ground. There's these authors, in your opinion, in your analysis, really not opinion, in your analysis, would probably agree a lot more based upon, whatever your thesis is. So that's our first option. Our next option is focus on one of the motivating factors that both sides use and evaluate how each side uses it. Now, let me point out that this is one motivating factor, but not just one motivating factor. In other words, throughout the body of the essay, you'll be using, 3 or 4 motivating factors and discussing each one individually. So it's not simply just one motivating factor, but this is, one paragraph might take up space on values. One might take up space on ideology and ideals. One might take up space on fears and concern. So let's look at our example. Both sides of the poverty debate focus on the role of public services in California. However, in Professor Stewart's work, he calls on a need to create more public sector jobs. And in Jones's essay, she argues that more taxes for public projects equals less employment in the private sector, which is a common point of debate amongst liberals and conservatives. Note the citation there, okay? You could use this option to focus on how each side chooses to present the dangers/importance of these factors. So this is one possible motivating factor. That's what I'm presenting here, the danger/the importance, right, or fears and concerns is what this example demonstrates. Again, you would need more than that, okay, throughout the body of your essay. You focus on different motivating factors. Okay, option number 3, compare and contrast the different ways that the two sides try to convince readers to support their views. Because some of these arguments are focused on 2 completely different ideas, you might have to treat each side separately in your analysis. If you can't find one idea or one motivating factor that both sides seem to use, analyze each side separately by focusing on the motivating factors of one side and then the other. This isn't the best way to go, but when you are working with essays in which the authors aren't in direct dialogue with one another, it might be the easiest way to construct an essay. All this means is, if you'll notice in the topics chart at the beginning, if you'll recall, there were some motivating factors that didn't exactly line up. And all this is saying is, okay, that might happen rather frequently in the articles that you use. In that case, you want to make sure that you have enough space to write about. So basically, you want to look at 2 different motivating factors and break them down and consider how they might react, okay, how both sides might react to this. And you base that on the information that you have read and that you've analyzed. So let's take a look at the example. According to Stewart, in the liberal model of economic justice, the role of government in alleviating poverty stresses the need to enforce laws which support a system of economic equity for all Americans. Jones, however, doesn't address the question of economic inequality and instead focuses on the question of personal responsibility and the need for people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Again, notice the citation. And just so that I can stress this, notice the part where it says, Jones, however, doesn't address the question of economic inequality and instead focuses on the question of, this is my, this is a statement that says, okay, Stewart talks about this, Jones doesn't really talk about it, but if I were to guess based upon what I've read in this article, this is what she might say about economic justice. Okay, that's that statement right there. So because both of these positions are disparate, you can't really use option 1 or 2. Instead, you analyze each essay separately based on the motivating factors and the thesis of each side. That's all this is. Okay. Remember, if you don't have a motivating factor matchup, that's fine. That's why I said you can use more than just one option here in this essay. Okay, and then the conclusion, of course. This is the summing up of the analysis and findings by trying to find the common ground between the two sides. You'll recall I said people make the mistake of just saying, and the common ground for these 2 articles is X. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's not very good writing. Instead, try to write something that demonstrates that both sides on this debate would agree, and this is the starting point. Try to phrase it in some way that's constructive. So, for example, perhaps both sides of the poverty debate could consider their desire to improve the U.S. economy, and perhaps they are both concerned enough about the poor that they can focus on creating constructive dialogue on such an important issue. So we want to use constructive language. And sometimes this might seem like, you're trying to pull this all together, with bits and pieces, duct tape and a dream. But if you just kind of just settle yourself and don't freak out too bad and organize this topics chart as best as you can and write an outline, I assure you, you're going to do well on this essay, okay? So good luck to you, and looking forward to reading your paper.